Dr. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us for our Reclaim podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Colin. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk to your audience.
Absolutely. I'm really excited that you're here. I've had the chance to hear you speak on some different podcast interviews. You've even been a part of speaking at some conferences. And so I really felt like some of the things that you had to share and some of your areas of expertise as they relate to pornography and sex addiction and so on could really benefit the men who listen to this podcast. Would you share a little bit with us about yourself and about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a second career for me. I was a marketing and advertising executive in the pharmaceutical world for almost 30 years. And this became a calling from God that I received. I suffered myself with sex addiction from the time I was about 14, came across pornography. And then when I started dating, I was a womanizer, couldn't be in one relationship at a time. And I'm not going to go through the whole story right now, but basically, after, destroying a couple marriages at the age of about 38, I went and sought help to find out what it was. But again, I just thought, okay, I was labeled a skirt chaser when I was very young by my friends. And I thought, okay, that's just what I am. But no, I came to understand I have an attachment disorder. I'm an avoidant, and therefore I have one foot in and one foot out of every relationship. Also, I have an addictive brain, and therefore I have a compulsive disorder too. Once I understood all those, I was able to manage them in a proper way. And so now my wife and I next month will be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. And I'm happy to
Congratulations.
say that I've been faithful the entire time. Shouldn't have to brag
Wow.
about it. Actually been with her for 27 years. Shouldn't have to brag, but that is the case of what it is. So as I said before, God brought me into this calling, went back to school and, got my master's in counseling, then did all the state work, all the supervision. And I've been in my private practice now with my wife for 12 years. She came and joined the ministry about 6 years ago. I used to work with both men and women, men with their sexual addiction, pornography addiction, and women who were dealing with betrayal. She now handles the betrayal part of the ministry. And therefore we collaborate a lot and we work together, but we have many couples that we see. I see the husband, she sees the wife. I have during this time really, I guess I've made my niche in the idea that I am a big believer that it is our unresolved childhood pain points that still haunt us today. And that is one of the major drivers, not just for sex or porn addiction, but for all addictions. And through that, I came up with the inner child model that has now been out there for about 6 years. And it is really, I've been blown away by its success and its takeoff, especially not just throughout this country, but throughout the world. I get inundated with emails and from people who just saying that it made such a difference in their lives. And the thing about the inner child model is just one tool. It doesn't mean that we don't need to do our 12-step work, or we don't need to be in our groups per se. No, it's just one tool that we use for the whole thing. Because basically what it does, it answers the why question. Why do I think, feel, and act the way I do? Because I believe, just like I did when I found out that I suffered from, again, an attachment disorder, and that changed everything because now I was empowered. I understood what is the driver that lead me to pursue other women, even if I'm in a relationship. And now I was able to control that, to say, no, stop. We don't need to be fearful that someone's going to hurt us or abandon us or leave us, which was the wound I suffered as a child. I don't have to worry about that. And so therefore, managing my kid, I was then able to manage my addiction.
It's a beautiful story. I think there's a lot of men out there who have been wounded or feel wounded, who are hurt, who are struggling with pornography, who want to be able to say that I now understand this. I now have a degree of control over this. And I think it's beautiful that in your story, not only were you able to do that, but you were able to turn into a career where you're able to help, like you said, you've developed a couple models and ideas further that have really just spread throughout the world. And I've heard it on a lot of different podcasts. And so thank you. I want to say thank you for your work.
Well,
Um,
let's give thanks to where it really belongs, and that's to him,
yes, that's
and
right.
that's where it goes. But I'll say that the point you brought up just a moment ago, which is a good one. There are so many men and actually women now too. In fact, I have a new book coming out at the end of the year, Going Deeper for Women, and how the inner child impacts their
Okay.
love and porn addiction. But yes, there are lots of people who want to break free from this. But you
Right.
know what? Behavior modification is not the complete answer.
Mm,
Yes. Can it help? Definitely. Is there a place for things on our devices? Is there a place for all that? Yes.
right.
But it's not the root of the problem. We need to understand that what we're dealing with here is a problem that is based on our inability to deal with emotional pain.
Right.
Anyone struggling with an addiction cannot sit with emotional discomfort. And we taught ourselves at a very young age to run from emotional pain. So therefore, at a child, we might have turned to food, television, today, video games, all those kind of things that they turn to distract. So therefore, I don't have to think about it.
Right.
And then as we got older, oh, we stumble across sex and we find, oh my gosh, this is the mother of all distractions. And that's where we wind up with. That's where we are today. Need to understand whenever something happens in our life that causes a level of emotional distress, and it may be even minor, our inner child pulls something out of his storage unit that looks very similar to something from the past. So he's equating an event that just happened with emotional pain from the past. And so what's happened now, your anxiety level continues to rise with
Yeah.
you unaware of it. You
Right.
think that, oh, I'm getting more and more annoyed about the current event. It's not. It's not just
Mm,
that. It's also the previous pain that have come back. And again, you're going to resort back to the coping mechanism that we've done for decades or years. And that is, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to go and distract myself.
yeah, that's really good. Recently, my wife and I, we went out to the Buffalo River here in Arkansas. It's a beautiful national park. It's a scenic river. But when you go out there and you're in the kayak, we actually spent multiple days on the river and we camped overnight on these sandbars alongside of it. And there are parts of the Buffalo River that are very remote. They're pretty wild. It's really cool. You see bald eagles and there's just really abundant wildlife. But one thing I noticed is that when you go on experiences like that, you wind up having a lot of time just sitting in your kayak thinking to yourself in your own thoughts. And it's not until you have this experience like that in our society today that you realize how much we don't give ourselves time with our thoughts. And I think that's why, and I'm not trying to judge people who take river trips, but a lot of times people who take river trips, they're blasting music nonstop and they're taking, alcoholic beverages and other things, and those things are fun, but they also are kind of effective at keeping us from spending too much time alone with our thoughts. And what I'm hearing you say is that we have more distractions available to us than ever in order to help us avoid our thoughts. Now, when you say inner child, I'm sure there'll be men listening who don't fully understand what you mean by that. And so maybe we can spend some time talking about that and you can describe your work when it comes to understanding the inner child and the emotions that are going on in us as older
Yeah,
men.
absolutely. We all have, and again, I'm a big believer in the inner child. We all have an inner child within us. My inner child model and my I guess, view of the inner child is a little bit different than people like Charles Whitman, who wrote about the kid and wrote about how he needs to be nurtured and loved, and he becomes a happier kid. My kid never becomes happy
Hmm.
because my kid is locked in this time warp of when we went through pain. We went through just a lot of different emotional pain and discomfort. And we didn't know what to do with that pain. Because as I said, there was no adult there walking us through it. The parents who are healthy parents, if they see that their kids in crisis, they will sit, they will nurture, they will, try to help the child understand that, what you're going through, yes, it is upsetting, but it will pass. Perhaps maybe I've even gone through it at times. I mean, that's what we see a lot of. What are we seeing? A major increase in suicides among children who have been bullied. And I believe part of that, and I'm not shifting the blame to the parent. However, these kids, for whatever reason, whether they just kept it to themselves or, and they didn't share because maybe it felt like I'm not going to get what I need from someone. Well, you know what? They're looking at this situation thinking it's never going to end. I will live like this for the rest of my life in fear. And they think there's only one way out. And it's very similar with some of the things we may have gone through, where again, we're terrified over something that we really shouldn't be terrified over. Yeah, should be maybe feeling a sense of discomfort, but not terrorized over it. And therefore, if there's nobody there to help us, we're going to figure out, all right, how do I deal with this? Well, in our case is I'm not going to think about it. So anyway, the inner child, that model developed originally in my practice when I started listening to the stories that men were telling me. And I came up with the 9 reasons why men abuse sex. And those reasons vary. I mean, they come into the idea of the unaffirmed child, the unnoticed child, bored, the emotionally voided child, the entitled kid, the stressed child, weak, inferior. And I'm adding 2 new ones to that mix, and that's the enmeshed child and the spiritually wounded. As you can see, and I didn't even run through all of them, they all have emotional pain points that we have dealt with. So with the model, what we're doing is men are going through it. And I've said women are going to be going through theirs also. In fact, in that model, there are 10, and some of them are very different than the men that we have. But anyway, getting back to the men, they're going to go through and they're going to pick out which of these kids they resonate with based on the description of what happens with that, like, for example, the unaffirmed child, a kid who grows up not getting a lot in the way of praise or perhaps too much criticism, or maybe was overpraised for academic, athletic accomplishments, or maybe appearance. And then the spotlight goes out. And now it's like, oh, where's all my affirmation? So that gives you one idea of some of what's involved with those kids. So people go through, they look, they say, okay, I resonate with, and most people resonate with between 4 and 6 of the kids. But the most important part of that, Colin, is the idea of what are the core emotional triggers that activate each of those kids. And most of them have very unique core emotional triggers. Some cross over, but they are rather unique. Those are the things we have to be aware of. See, for us, when we're dealing with porn addiction, sex addiction, the main focus is more along the lines of, what's your erotic template and what are the visual triggers that you have. These are emotional triggers.
Yes.
And therefore, understanding and knowing when an event happens and it matches up with one of these core emotional triggers, your kid's been activated. And if your kid's been activated, your anxiety level is going to increase. And therefore, your sense of compulsiveness is going to increase. And therefore, your likelihood of making a bad decision is going to increase. That gives you just a little snapshot of what that inner child thing is.
Yeah, and that can happen pretty quickly, and that can happen. A lot of those things are subconscious, right? And so
Yeah,
I
they're
think
all subconscious.
I think a lot of men listening to this who aren't, they haven't spoken with a lot of therapists or counselors. And so maybe a lot of these concepts are new to them. I wonder how many men might be a little bit skeptical because, I think as men, we would like to believe that we're stronger and tougher than the things that have happened to us in the past. Like,
Mhm.
like those things that happened to us when we were kids don't have to dictate our lives anymore. And if we're just strong enough about it, we've got a strong mindset, we're strong willed, then those things don't have to affect us. Do you think there's a lot of men out there who would love to, who are believing that narrative, who don't?
I've encountered that in my practice numerous times.
Yeah.
And the man who believes that is kidding himself. He's in denial. Is that the same guy who will say, fear? I'm not afraid of anything.
Hmm.
Men, just like women, are loaded with fears. We have them.
Yeah.
We've done a great job in many cases of repressing them. They're not there. We don't think we are. We are tough. We are strong. We are courageous. We can do any. Yeah, you may have a lot of courage, but that does not mean you don't have fears. You may be able to, take on the biggest guy in the room. But you know what? When your wife wants you to be vulnerable with you, you're going to be sitting there figuring out, oh, wait a second, how do I get out of this conversation as quick as possible? And that is all based on fear. The fear that I'm going to say something wrong, the fear that I'm going to, whatever I say is going to disappoint her, the fear that I'm in trouble. We
Yeah.
are loaded with fear. But the problem, this becomes another aspect, just like being unaware of your inner child and what makes that kid tick, that undermines you and what's going on in your world. Because again, he takes those childhood pain points and he makes them
Mhm.
still haunt you today. It's the
Mhm.
same thing with the fears.
Mhm.
And that kid has all your fears.
Mhm.
He has them all.
Mhm.
But if you do not acknowledge them, if you want to be, so egotistical to think, oh, that's not me, and like I said, you're kidding yourself. You're going to continue to struggle, and not just in the area of perhaps sex addiction, porn addiction. You're going to struggle with your anger. You're going to struggle with your wanting to withdraw. You're going to struggle with the fact that it's difficult at times to accept influence from other people. Okay, I can go on and on and
Right.
on. There are many things that you're going to deal with. And that's why we go back to what is the objective of the model to answer the why question. Why? Why do you think that way? Why do you feel that way? Why do you act that way? We should be asking ourselves that whenever we engage, if we become defensive about something, why? Why am I being defensive?
Mhm.
What's going on here? And to be able to figure that out. And why do I want to do that? So I can
Mhm.
stop and I can handle conversation in a more healthier way. But again, head down, running through life, and
Yeah.
we are oblivious to
Mhm.
many of the factors that drive our behaviors, our thoughts, and our feelings.
That's so good. I think everyone's aware that when you train for a sport or any kind of challenge, there are many challenges that we have to prepare and train ourselves for, learn how to identify things, learn how to react quickly to things in scenarios. But when it comes to emotional fitness and emotional awareness, I'm hearing you say we have to go deeper as men because this is driving so many of our actions and things that we're doing that we're not even really aware of.
Colin, you bring up a great point.
Yeah, go
It's a
ahead.
great point, and I bring it up constantly to client, especially for those who are, because let's face it, we're dealing with sex addiction, porn addiction. There's the idea of, all right, becoming sober.
Mm,
But there's also the other component, and that is, oh, I have somebody who really, really hurting right now, who I've broken their heart. That is the hill most men die on. They can get sober. Once they learn and understand what really drives their addictive behaviors, they can help themselves. They can learn the whole process of what do I do. But
mm,
when it comes to being able to be there to be supportive of the person that they have caused problems for, that is where they struggle. And that's why, for me, it is the idea of preparation. How do I do that? Just like you said, you know what? You don't walk on an athletic field and just start playing unless you are that in that 1 percentile of the most gifted people, and even they don't do it, right? But here, we need to figure out, okay, what's the pattern that happens when I'm having a conversation with my significant other? All right, what's the pattern? When do I start to get in trouble with this? When do I start to lose my focus? So now I sit and I tell them, write out the steps. And what are the 3, 4 things you have to focus on before you walk into that dialogue?
Right.
And even if you get blindsided by the dialogue, to be able to say, wait, 1 second, give me 2 minutes, go off, think about it. What do I need to focus on? Then come back and do it. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really important for men to understand. You can't help them if you don't have a game plan.
Yes, and what I'm hearing you say is that that game plan, men have to understand that it can also look unique to them. It's going to look different than what another man needs or needs to plan for. And so I'm hearing you say these emotional pain points in our lives can be unique to us. The ways that we go about avoiding these emotions can be unique to us. And so I am guessing that you would say the way that we heal from these things and the kind of plans we put together are also unique to us. Now, how does a man discover what his specific unique strategies or needs are when it comes to this, when it comes to healing and growing in this area?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, you need to understand again what are the weaknesses. And we go back to, because just like being triggered to act out in perhaps a sexual way, when we're engaging with our partner, our inner child is getting triggered. All
Right.
right. There are triggers that are coming. And if you're not aware of what those pain points are, you're going to just go with the flow. One of the biggest factors that I see where really men struggle with when it comes to their partner is the fact they lose focus of her pain. And instead, what they see is hostility. They're looking at hostility, they're looking at anger. And yes, that is coming at you. But, okay, a man who, again, is mature, especially a Christian mature man, can put aside his sense of offense. I'm feeling offended, and I can look forward and cut through that and say, oh, there's that wounded little girl,
Mm.
which will give me more endurance to be able to deal with it. But even then, we're all going to reach a capacity, okay, especially if we're an hour 3, 4, 5, 6, which is not what we should be doing. But if we are,
Mm.
then we need to be able to say, wait, time out. I need a break. I'm going to take one. I may even take it for the rest of the night, and we'll come back tomorrow. The key there, I will be back, and you have to be able to go back. But what we're trying to do is identify, again, even in that circumstance, the same thing that we talked about with the inner child and our acting out sexually. What are those emotional pain points that trigger us? So, for example, if someone makes you feel you're inadequate, that could be one of your pain points. If someone makes you feel dismissed or rejected, that could be one of those. You know, if someone makes you feel that you are, not desired, that could be another one. Whatever could, and there are hundreds. There are hundreds of emotional pain points. In fact, if you feel weak in front of someone, that
Yes.
could be one. So therefore, knowing what those are, understanding and dealing with them, what I feel, okay, I feel these emotions. These emotions are driven by your inner child. But if you slow everything down, and this is what we run with, basically, we run on these emotions, we just run off. Instead, I slow down and I move away from these emotions what I feel, and I move over to what is real. Now they're an adult, and that adult is assessing the situation through the lens of adult eyes versus the eyes of a child. So therefore, now I can tell my inner child, wait, just relax, calm down. I got it. That's all. I don't need to nurture. I don't need it. I can handle this. I'm going to look at it a different way.
Hmm. Wow. That's really powerful. This relationship that you have with your inner child, this awareness is something that you're saying really needs to stick around for life. The inner child dynamic, these conversations with yourself, this awareness of the inner child, it's not going to go away, but it does, those conversations do get better. They do become full of self-awareness. They do become full of the ability to self-regulate and
Mhm.
self-control, right? So it improves. We can heal in this area in the way that we talk to ourselves and think about ourselves in the inner child within us.
You have it dead on. That's exactly right. The kid never goes away, and the kid will always get upset when there is this trigger that happens. However, two things. One, over time, the pain that the child feels desensitizes. Because why? Not that he's not troubled by the pain.
Mhm.
He knows there's an adult coming. An adult's going to come to say, hey, I can handle this. That would take care of the kid. And then on the other hand is exactly what you just said. Why by me sitting here moving away from my emotions, now I'm not acting upon my emotions moving forward. All right. Which again, that is adolescent. Okay. I mean, how many times have we, if you raise kids and, they do something and said, what in the world were you thinking? And then you come to understand they weren't. They were just feeling. Okay. They were just feeling and they thought, oh, that would feel good or that would feel smart. It was like, no, that's not it at all. But when we move to what is real, away from what we feel, then what are we also doing for ourselves? We're creating confidence, confident that I can do the right thing time and time again. Because before we begin the process, we don't think we can do it right at all. Now, we have no confidence in our ability to manage this, and confidence is critical. And that's the other aspect. So yes, you nailed it.
Yeah. Thanks for elaborating on that. How can we make this more specific now to pornography? Can you give us kind of some examples or case studies? And the reason why we want to talk about pornography here is because it is the habit that I think there's a lot of unresolved emotional pains wind up manifesting themselves in. It's not the only one, but it's so common right now amongst men in our culture. This is why Reclaimed exists. And many other communities that you've been a part of is just helping men understand what is driving them towards pornography. And maybe we could even hit on a couple different ones since you said that they tend to be unique for each guy. So maybe we could talk about a couple different scenarios of how this winds up playing out.
Now, pornography aspect can relate to all the kids because again, it serves as a distraction. But if we were to look at two of them in particular, and we look at the higher level of prevalence where these kids wind up sticking with pornography and not escalating, it's going to be more along the lines of the bored child and also the unnoticed child. So those two, right? So with the bored child, again, they grow up in an environment that is very low key, it's quiet. They could be surrounded by people. They could have 4 or 5 siblings, their parents in the home, but nobody is really engaging very much with them. Everybody has their own little life that they're living in. So they learn how to entertain themselves. And therefore, after a while, they become almost comfortable in that being bored, but they still need the distraction. And again, pornography serves as a wonderful distraction. One case, if you want to talk about cases, I have a client, he's in his mid-50s now. He actually played in a very well-known rock and roll band for many years. His father left when he was about 4, didn't really see his father at all after that. And he was raised by a mom who was a working mom. He was a latchkey kid from the time he was 6. He'd come home from school and he'd be in their apartment. Mom didn't come home till 7:30 every night. By then, as you can imagine, she's exhausted. He's already made some food for himself to eat. He is bored out of his mind when he comes home, and he moved away from, what he found at some point was he stumbled across one of the kids at school had some magazines, and he gave him a couple of those, and those are what he would leaf through and look at, because again, back then he wasn't, there was no internet at that point when he was growing up, but that's where he started to find porn. And then all that time alone led him to create a lot of fantasies in his own head that were very sexual in nature. If you look at the unnoticed child, now these are kids who feel like they don't really fit in, they don't belong, they don't measure up. Nobody ever chases them. They're the ones who have to go chase everybody else. Well, again, pornography serves in a way, and some people find this very difficult to believe, but pornography serves in a way that they almost feel that the people in the videos that they're watching or in the images want them. They want to pay attention to them. They want them to participate in it with them. And that's the fantasy that they create. So therefore, they use porn that way, not just for the fact of the sexual gratification, but it's also gratifying a sense that, oh, I now feel that I am desired and wanted. So that give you a sense of porn, and I can pretty much relate that in a way, to almost all of these kids. So therefore, porn serves a purpose, but is not just to sexually stimulate, with perhaps maybe if you look at the stressed child, they're using porn as the stress buster. Okay, that's what it is. I'm leaving the rest of the world behind, and this is just about me getting this sense of being invigorated, being stimulated. And then once they're done, though, we're back in the stressful environment. So therefore, it continues to go on and on and on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for laying a couple of those out for us. I think everyone is born into this world looking for someone who's looking for them. And that strikes at something so deep. I think that could be shared across so many men struggling with porn. Just this idea that we're not wanted or desired enough. And what I'm hearing you say is this doesn't just have to do with women. And what I mean by that is, if I grew up not feeling desired enough by attractive women that I found sexually attractive, then I might struggle with this. What I'm hearing you say is it could just be a childhood of not being desired or pursued by anybody. It could be your parents, friends. And I think that's a really important concept for men to dwell on and grasp. And so I think then the next really important question becomes, if I don't feel wanted or desired right now, maybe it's even from my own spouse, then where do you go from there? Because it's a very painful and lonely feeling. And if pornography is our most powerful tool for medicating this, what do we do? Where do we start to
Well,
heal?
we start where we're supposed to start in the first place, and to understand that we're the only place we'll ever go to feel unconditionally loved and accepted with God, and to start to really work to strengthen that relationship. I mean, for me, my story, I was introduced to, Christ when I was, maybe 6 years old, with communion, and then moving on to confirmation. but I had no idea what that meant. I mean, for me, it was more along, I was taught that, you know what, you should feel so guilty because of what he did for you. And that's the way, the reason you should love him. Like, okay, well, just, all right, I'll do that. I mean, I had no idea. And it wasn't until when I, met my current wife, who was a, Southern Baptist at the time, that she said to me, she goes, you know what, you go to church, but you just go to church. She goes, where's the relationship? I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And she took me to a different church, and I sat in the pew, and I heard for the first time from a pastor, like, well, it's all about the relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'm like, that blew my mind, and not in a good way. It was like, this is ridiculous. He's a nut. I mean, how in the world do you have a relationship with someone I can't see, I can't hear, I can't talk to? Now, of course, a lot of that erroneous, but that's what I felt. And that began me on my journey to really understand what a relationship with Christ is. And that brought me a sense of peace that I can't get from anyone else here in this world. So that's where you begin that. The second thing you do is to understand that, okay, if I'm struggling with my spouse, if I'm maybe struggling with other people, what am I doing wrong? Where am I making mistakes? What do they need from me that I'm not providing? I have to look on my side and my lane of what needs to be done. And therefore then seeking them out to find out what are their pain points. What is it? Where am I falling short? And not, again, move away from that sense of offense that I've been feeling. That, oh, you know what, she's just being mean to me, or she's not caring for me, and she's rejecting me. Well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason, and we have to try to find out what that reason is. So I think those are two most critical things that we need to be doing.
Yeah, a lot of times we develop this mindset of hostility and everything's about us, in the sense that, whatever kind of problems are going on between me and my spouse, the things that she's saying, we only see it as like she's the enemy, or we become our own enemies, and we forget to look for the underlying reasons. It's like earlier in the episode, you talked about, we need to ask why, and we need to dig deeper, but it's hard to do that when we're constantly being emotionally triggered, and we think that that's all there is, and then we do turn people into enemies when really we're on the same team, and really we're just going to our protective places. We're just living out our inner child,
That you
right?
just nailed it again. We are allowing the inner child to run the show. We're not just looking at him in terms of what the impact he has on our sex or porn addiction. We have to look at him and the impact he has on everything in our life, and especially our relationship. Because again, it's like, oh, she's not treating us well. This isn't fair. She shouldn't be doing this to us. And you got to quiet the kid down to say, no, what you feel, which is keeping you at a distance from her, I have to move over to what is real. And I have to see what her pain is. Now, I know some guys are going to say, yeah, well, what about my pain? Oh, that's a very mature way of looking at things, isn't it? Here you go. You're back to, and it's funny, Colin, a lot of the things we say, if you look back at it, you say, oh my God, that's what a kid says. What a kid says. What about my pain? This isn't fair. She should treat me better. And I'm hearing this from men who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, like I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we are emotionally undeveloped. We are 13-year-olds walking around in adult bodies, and we need to mature. And that doesn't mean we're not mature in many other ways. We can be mature financially from a work perspective, but I'm talking about emotional maturity. It's time to grow up.
Mm. And one thing I'm hearing you say is that emotions have to be held in their proper place. they can't be undervalued or ignored completely. But at the same time, you were talking about looking for what's real. If we only allow our emotions to dictate things in the immediate moment, then we also fall into a danger place. We also wind up hurt and confused. And so I'm hearing you talk a lot about how this emotional fitness or intelligence that we're discussing, this emotional awareness, it takes practice, it takes work, it takes time, right?
Takes a lot of time. This is all based on my second book or third book, Why Men Struggle to Love. And that is all about understanding, one, how did we turn out this way? And basically it's the fact that we were not given the tools and guidance we needed in those early stages of childhood development, where we learn how to have empathy, to attune, to identify our emotions, to regulate them, and how to express them, and most importantly, how to sit with that pain. Nobody teaches us. So therefore, we're going off and trying to deal with it on our own. And most of the time, we will get stuck in being able to, in sticking with our emotions and allowing our emotions to drive our actions, which is not helpful, as many people find out. We
Yeah.
need to be able to slow everything down and move away from the emotional state and to evaluate them with wise mind, rational mind of an adult. And again, you're right, it takes a long time to do. It is a never-ending process. I've been doing this now for 20 years, and I'm still not fully emotionally developed. I never will be. All right, because this is the way I was hardwired. But if you ask my wife, she'll say, yeah, he made major inroads. Does he get it right all the time? No, he doesn't. Okay, nobody does. But for men, and it takes about 2 years normally to go through the process of learning to be emotionally developed. That's what it takes. Some men get it faster. Some men takes a little bit longer, and some men just don't get it. They will just not grasp the idea because they are so stuck in the sense that, again, this isn't fair. And that's where, again, as I say, many of them die on that hill.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, men, if you're listening to this out there, it's now too late to start. This is a lifelong process. It is not too late. Don't be discouraged. Maybe if you've lived your life not ever looking into this, not ever understanding your emotions or your feelings of loneliness or being undesired, whatever it may be, it's not too late to go on a journey to understand and find healing. And so I'd really love to spend our last few minutes in this episode together, Eddie, just trying to encourage men who are out there who are really struggling with porn right now. If someone's in frequent porn use, they're feeling the shame. How can we use some of the topics we've talked about and just cast a light on this of hope, that men can change, that men can heal? It sounds hard, to be honest. I mean, hearing you talk about this, I mean, it takes courage to face our emotions. It takes time and just willingness to try something new. Um, but talk to us about the potential for healing and hope and in all this.
There is great potential for healing. First and foremost, you have to admit that you have the problem. Second, you have to have a desire to change. I mean, if you don't have those two things, you're going to be operating at a major deficit. The other aspect to understand is the fact that, you know what, you are not a pervert. You are not, someone who's deviant. You are not evil. What you are is broken. Join the world. We're all broken. And all of us deal with something or another. In your case, it's pornography. All right. Also understanding that, you know what? You're not looking at porn because it's like, oh my God, It's just so thrilling and exciting, and I need to do this on a regular basis because I need that level of excitement. That's not the reason you're doing it. And therefore then with that reason, then it's like, well, I can't control this. I'm just out of control. Well, you're out of control because you're not looking at what's at the root. If you look at what's at the root and you find the solution to the problem, if you understand why you do what you do, you then become empowered. And then what you're going to find, it is a lot easier to be able to conquer this demon, especially when you bring in the strong community, when you bring in that, really good accountability partner, when you wind up taking care of yourself, when you're proactive in your approach. You know what? God, just today, that's all I want today is purity. Help me walk that line. And if I feel myself moving away from that, then help me have the understanding to sit there instead of just running to it, to say, what's going on? Why? Why all of a sudden right now? Because I've been good the last 6 hours, 7 hours. I've been good all day. Why now? Oh, well, maybe I'm drained mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit lonely toward the end of the night. Maybe that disagreement I had with my boss is still lingering and sucking the lifeblood out of me. And I want to really forget about it, even though it's not top of mind, but I still want to really forget about it. This is about self-reflection. Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And what drives you? And once you understand all of that, this problem becomes easier to manage.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that just automatic. That's not what I'm saying. It's automatically gone. It becomes easier to manage because that's what we're doing. We're managing this disorder. We're not curing it because you have an addictive brain.
Yeah.
And therefore you have to manage that brain. Therefore, then how do you manage that? Take care of your anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of your anxiety, because increased anxiety equals increased compulsiveness, which equals more bad decision making. So there is so much hope. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy. It sometimes takes learning from your mistakes. Okay. And you know what? The whole idea of shame, that's just Satan's tool. The Satan tool trying to, again, keep you stuck. And that's why I took those 9 reasons and I made them into 9 children. Because what I did was I externalized the addiction. There you go. That's my problem.
Yeah.
That's my problem right there. And I have to deal with him,
Yeah.
not me. So I think that's what I would be saying to folks. And seek the help. There's lots of help out there. There's a lot of good people. You're talking to a guy right there now who's running this podcast who's great at doing this. Just reach out to people.
Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, I do want people to know that the tools and resources out there to do this, like you said, are available. It's what I'm striving to do. We have a community at Reclaimed. We have a 10-week journey. We have an app. We provide coaching. Dr. Eddie, I know you're connected to a number of resources to help men as well. Would you be willing to share about some of those?
Yep, absolutely. For those who can't really afford counseling or even coaching, I have an online program. It's a 12-week online program. It's very reasonably priced because we're not trying to make money on it. Just trying to help people. And this is about the inner child. And again, once you have this inner child, concept down, then you look for maybe communities that you can, learn more about it, or just to be able to share what you've learned and get it from other people. And there you can go to www.innerchild-sexaddiction.com. There are the books that are on Amazon, Going Deeper, How the Inner Child Impacts Your Sexual Addiction, and Why Men Struggle to Love, Overcoming Relational Blind Spots. And then there's the book of Removing Your Shame Label. So I think all of those could be really good resources for people also.
Yeah, great. I'd love to link to some of those resources in the show notes of this podcast episode. I just want to wrap up by saying, towards the end, you were sharing some things. And what I heard you saying is that when men engage in porn for long periods of time, they're looking for ways, they're asking themselves, well, what does this tell me about myself? And they look at different types of porn and they start wondering, is this who I am? And what I hear you say is, no, you don't have to give in to the narrative that viewing pornography is trying to tell you. There are ways to dig deeper, to ask why, to discover those reasons, and there are tools and resources available for you to heal. And that is not who you are. It does not get to have the say or the final say in who you are as a man and your
Right,
character, your
right.
integrity.
Every man I worked with who struggled with same-sex attraction, not one of them have ever been homosexual. And it's always been an emotional father wound, in some cases even a mother wound. But that's what's at the core of that. And the label that you're a porn addict, well, you can move away from that. Again, you have an addictive brain. You have a compulsive disorder. I wear one label. I am the prince of the king. That's the label I wear. And you should wear that too, or whatever it is that you design yourself to wear. But this should not define who we are as men.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you so much for sharing from all your experience and your perspectives, Dr. Eddie. I really enjoyed this. I really had fun.
Anytime. I enjoyed this too. Great. I appreciate your ministry and what you're doing for men. The fact that you have so many resources that you just give away to them. That is, again, so Christ-like, and just keep it up. And yes, you can reach out to me anytime.
Thank you so much. All right, Dr. Eddie, have a wonderful
Bye.
day.